What's up everyone, my name is Zach and welcome back for another video. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys about all the books that I read in May. I didn't realize I read so many books in May, so I'm going to have to go through these kind of quickly in order to keep this video at a reasonable length. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right in. I do want to know, what did you guys read in May? Maybe tell me your favorite book and your least favorite book in the comments. I would love to hear from you guys, and I would love to know what you're reading, what you're loving, and what you're not. So yeah. Let's jump right into the videos, as if this is going to be more than one video. We're going to have to do this quickly so that it's not more than one video. Anywho, I haven't had coffee yet this morning. It's like 8:30 on a Sunday, so let's get into the books, shall we? I have separated them into the books that I own physically and then the books that I don't own physically. So we're going to start with the ones that I do own physically, and then I'll show you guys, I'll put the pictures of the books on the screen for the ones that I don't own physically. Okay, other than separating them off into any other categories, like they're not in any particular order, just physical books and then books that I read on audio or Kindle, etc., or from the library, which I'll inform you guys of when we get to those books. So in no other particular order, I randomly picked up Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. This is a pandemic horror novel, and it really takes place over about, I would say, maybe 72 hours. It's a pretty quick book. It's about 315 pages, but it reads very quickly. I'm going to do a video whenever I read enough books about pandemic fiction. So I'll save some of my thoughts for that, but I did end up giving this like 3 stars, I believe. It was very good. It was very fast paced. I would say it's like a horror thriller. And it was very interesting to read about. So the virus in this book is rabies, and humans are getting it now. Paul Tremblay wrote this during the COVID pandemic. There is a lot of commentary about the way that the United States in particular handled the pandemic, about mixed messaging, poor media, about hesitation about vaccines, and all of those things are in here, and that was very cool. It ended the way that I wanted it to end. I was afraid that it was going to end in a way that I didn't want it to end, or I didn't foresee the story going, but it ended the way I wanted it to. I guess the only reason I really didn't give it higher than 3 stars was because there was a middle chunk of the book that was kind of boring, and it almost felt like a different book. Although, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people could disagree with that. So if you've been wondering about this book, or you've been looking for a pandemic horror thriller, then this could be for you. I would maybe look up the trigger warnings. There are some topics that might be hard to read about, so I would look up the triggers that might spoil the ending, but yeah. So 3-ish stars from what I can remember. And then the next book is, I read The Alloy of Law. This is the first book in Era 2 of Mistborn, so I can't really say much about this because it's technically book 4 in a series, but no surprise to anyone, I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. Once I complete all of Era 2, I will do a video on all of the Mistborn books and sort of my thoughts and reviews on them. I've already done one for Era 1. I also vlogged my experiences through all of the first 3 Mistborn books. I decided not to do that for Era 2, and I'm going to make a video when I'm finished with all the Mistborn books for you guys to get all of my thoughts. Oh, something in my eye. So just very quickly, I absolutely love this book. I was a little bit worried that Era 2 I wouldn't love the characters as much. I do think I love the characters from Era 1 a little bit more, but these characters are very unique. I love Brandon Sanderson's writing. I think that he does fantasy better than no other person I've read. I'm just not dipping my toes into some more adult fantasy, but so far there's nothing like Brandon Sanderson, his characters, his world building, and his everything. I loved this book a lot. And it's very different from Era 1, which is really cool, and I think maybe some people didn't like, but I was excited that we were going to do a different kind of story, and we did. The characters from Era 1 are still mentioned, which was very cool. Overall, I really, really loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I have here for you guys is actually a book I read for book club. There'll be another book I read for book club later in this video, but that is Jade City. So my wife and I are a part of a fantasy sci-fi book club that meets once a month, and we're reading this series right now. So we waited to read the first one to see what everyone thought, and we've now decided to read the rest of the series, which is just 2 more books. So I'll be reading that book, Jade War, which is the second one, very soon to prepare for book club. But I gave this 5 stars. So did everyone in the book club, I believe. There wasn't a person who didn't like it, at least of everybody who showed up to talk about it. and we all had a lot of similar thoughts and feelings. I think there was just a little bit of differences. There was one character in particular that I really liked that everyone else really disliked. I say that to say that reading books for book club is really fun because it's really, really fun to talk about books with other people, especially when they're reading the same books with you at the same time. But anyways, Jade City is a urban-ish fantasy novel that takes place in a society where jade is a substance that helps people have more magical, almost superhuman powers. And there's an island where two clans really rule over this island and control the production or like flow of jade, and these two clans go way back in history. What I really loved about this book is it does sort of feel like it's sort of a mafia Godfather type of story, and the author nailed that and did it in a different setting. The characters in this book are really, really well fleshed out. I loved getting to know each of them separately. I loved everything about the world. It's pretty harsh. There are some deaths in this, which I kind of expected because of the type of story it is, mafia, Godfather type of story. But I really, really loved, there's so much about character in this book, and there's some really strong female characters. I mean, this is written by a female. Not that males can't write strong female characters, but I just think women in fantasy, we need more and more of that. And I really, really appreciated Fonda Lee in writing this novel. I loved everything that she did with the characters and how she had them interact. And you could feel the tension at times and just the loyalty to family. So much about this book was so good. So in summary, I gave it 5 stars. If you've been looking for a good urban fantasy to check out, this is really, really good. It's a little bit on the hefty side, but I think they only get bigger as they go. I'll report back about Jade War when I read that in a week or so. I haven't decided how I'm going to do videos for June. I have a bunch of video ideas that I'm kind of fleshing out and working on. So yeah, I will be reading Jade War, and I'll let you guys know in some video fashion how it turned out. And then the next physical book I have here is The Children on the Hill. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I actually listened to this on audio from the library, so I did check this out from the library as well. And I loved The Drowning Kind. If you've been on the channel before, you know The Drowning Kind, which is another book by this author, I loved. This one didn't hit the same. 3.5 stars. I think me last year before I started trying to be more selective about the way that I was giving 5-star reviews and etc. I probably would have given it a 4.5 star last year, but I'm trying to be more selective. So I think 3.5 stars lands somewhere decently in the middle. That's kind of how I felt about this book. There was a lot of really good things about it. I think there was very interesting storytelling. There was a lot of unexpected things. I think what would have made it a 4 or 5 star for me is if there was more about the podcast that was in here, if there was more about, I can't say too much about that, about these things to not give anything away. Essentially, this story is about trauma, and I know horror does a good job typically of writing about trauma, but these stories are dual timeline, so it goes back and forth from the past to the present, though this one stays more in the present than The Drowning Kind. Yeah, I guess all in all, 3.5 stars. If you've been looking for a horror, this one is also a little bit more similar to a thriller than The Drowning Kind was, and I didn't feel like it worked very well for this novel. I felt like this could have slowed down a little bit. It felt a bit repetitive, especially towards the end. The ending was okay. I don't know. There were just some things that didn't work for me like The Drowning Kind did, and maybe it's not fair to compare it to another novel of hers, but I don't know, something about it felt off, so I gave it 3.5 stars. The last book that I have here that I read physically is actually a book that I annotated, and it's a YA novel, which I haven't been reading very many of, but that is The Girls I've Been. You can see I annotated it. This one and a few other ones in this video, I actually have a reading vlog that I was part of. So I won't say too much about it because that reading vlog will be linked in the description box below. But I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This book does a really good job of addressing trauma, especially trauma in adolescence. It does a great job of talking about sexuality, in particular bisexuality or pansexuality. Those are not the same thing, but I'm not sure exactly how this main character identifies. But yes, you get the point. The story about this is the main character... I was going to say Tess, but that's the author's name. What is the main character's name? Remind me. Nora. The main character, Nora, and her girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend are in this novel. They together are going to drop off money at a bank from a fundraiser that they did. They end up becoming hostage at the bank, and during that stay of them being hostage at a bank, it goes back and forth from past to present, and Nora has went through a lot of trauma in her life, and this book in particular does a really good job of showing how someone who is interested romantically in more than one gender can do that equally. I think in society a lot of times we're like, oh, well, you must like one more than the other, but no, Nora likes both genders equally, and it does a really good job of describing that. So her ex-boyfriend who was there, he is not painted out to be a bad guy. He is like a really loving and caring guy. Their relationship just didn't work out, and her girlfriend isn't left off to the side. She's a very important character. I just think this is a really good novel overall. It's supposed to be made into a TV show, and I hope it does, because I think it'll make a great TV show. For our adult readers who don't really love YA, I'm getting to a point where YA is getting harder and harder for me to read. I still thought that this one was really good. So if you've been looking for something maybe a little bit different, then maybe give this a try. It is a thriller, I guess, a YA thriller, but I don't know. There's so much substance to this novel that I didn't expect. I didn't go into it wanting to annotate it, but there were so many good quotes and points that were in this book that I wanted to hold on to those. So I gave this 5 stars. So now we're going to move into the books that I don't have physical copies of. So I just have a little list on Notepad here. Boom. All right. Let's start with the other book club book that I read in the month of May, and that is The Bandit Queens. I actually did not give this book a rating because I did not finish it. And I also didn't give it a rating because I felt like this was more of a me problem than a book problem. In the book club that we did, I think most people thought that it was I think the average rating was probably about a 4-star. I think most people felt like there was some things, like very small things that could have been done better, but overall, most people enjoyed the book. The reason I did not finish it has nothing to do with the book, but has everything to do with me. I just don't love literary fiction, and this is literary fiction. I think the more I step away from the story, the more that I'm like, wow, that was entirely the problem. Like, this actually is a really good story. Basically, it's about a girl who lives in a remote village in India, and one day her husband leaves, and everyone in the village thinks that she killed him. So one day, one of her close friends comes to her and is like, I need you to help me kill my husband. If you've read Finlay Donovan, like that story might sound a little bit familiar. However, this is not really a mystery. It's not a thriller. None of that. Finlay Donovan is. This is not any of that. This is more a story. This is more literary fiction, more of a character story study. There's a lot of cultural elements that were really cool to learn about in it, though. So yeah, it's a good book. I just think literary fiction is not for me. And maybe as I grow into reading, as my reading tastes continue to change, maybe there will be some literary fiction that's for me. But yeah, I just don't want to give this a rating. I'll report what the book club said, and do what you will with that. The next book that I don't have a copy of physically is Eva Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. I loved this book. This was in several vlogs because it took me a little while to finish it, just because I was mostly reading it at night as I was going to sleep. This is a story about romance later in life after other things have failed. So we have 2 main characters. The main female character, Eva, this is not a spoiler. This is how the story starts out, and it's on the back of the book, I believe, but it's within the first chapter of the book. Eva is married to a very prominent doctor, and he is quite abusive, and they have a really bad relationship. She wants to leave him, so she packs a bag, puts it in the car, and gets ready to leave, like is getting all her things. She's literally leaving, and she gets a call that her husband has passed away. Through that, she is not grieving the way other people think that she should be grieving, because she has not told them about the things that happened in their marriage. The main male character is a very famous baseball pitcher, and all of a sudden he can't pitch anymore. Like, his pitches are not landing. He's not performing the same way that he used to. And so he's also going through this like big change later in life. And yeah, the story just really takes off from there. I will say, if you like Emily Henry, this feels very similar to Emily Henry's writing style. There's a lot of really fun and funny banter, but it's also very, has a more serious tone than like a rom-com, but it also, like, Linda Holmes knows how to have fun and make a joke about things. And I also think it's really cool to see people like in their 40s reading, like us having romance novels to read about people in their 40s, because a lot of the romance novels are like 17, 18, 19 years old, like very young, which is fine. I like to read those too. But I just think it's really nice to see that like romance isn't just for people who are in their new adult section of life. So I really loved it. It was a great book. And later I'll talk about, I read another book by Linda Holmes that in May as well. I guess the only thing else I will note about these books by Linda Holmes is they're a little bit slow, which I had no problem with because I loved everything about the story. But if you're used to reading more traditional rom-coms, I might be a little bit faster. Again, this isn't even in the romance section at Barnes & Noble. Actually, it's in the contemporary section. So I don't even know if it's supposed to be shelved as a romance. The main story is about two people coming together, but there is so much more going on that it wasn't even shelved in the romance section. So the next book that I have is Come Fly the World With Me. This was also in another vlog, so I won't talk too much about it. It is a nonfiction book about the flight industry during the Vietnam War and how flight attendants were treated. It's a book about sexism in the flight industry, really, about how planes were used, especially from Pan Am and the Vietnam War. I gave it 3.5, 3-ish stars. I felt like the main problem with this book was that she didn't lean into creative fiction and she didn't lean into just like telling you the facts straight up. She went back and forth between the two and it really didn't work for this novel in my opinion. I wish that she would have done either I'm just going to straight up write an essay for you about these things, or I'm going to do more of a creative approach. I got a little confused about who was who during the story because we kept jumping around a lot between different characters. I just feel like, yeah, but I learned a lot from the novel and that was really cool. So 3-ish stars. The next book I have on here is Star Splitter. This is a book that I got from Penguin Random House Audio. I gave it, I think, 4 stars on Goodreads, but I think thinking back about it and reflecting, it's more of a 3.5 star. This is a YA sci-fi story about the not so distant future. I guess maybe it'd be more distant than, okay, the medium distant future where we can teleport. So like it's explained really well in the novel. I will say about this book, this was also in another vlog if you guys want to check those out in the description and get more of my thoughts. But the novel actually does a really good job of explaining how teleportation could work without being too mathematical and too over the top, but explaining it in a way that was like, oh, that makes sense. So it's about teleportation. So basically part of your body stays one place and a new part of your body goes another place, and they call it like jumping. And essentially the story behind this is a girl jumps from one place to another, and when she gets there, things are not what they were supposed to be. And all of a sudden she is faced with herself as a clone, which I thought, this is annoying. I don't love clone stories, but this was actually done really well because it was basically a conversation about the past and the present, or the past and the future being taking place in the present. And they had to kind of solve a mystery and figure out what happened to the ship that is now destroyed and everybody has been killed, essentially. So it was a YA sci-fi thriller, I guess is how I would describe it. Thank you to Penguin Random House Audio for a copy of the audio arc. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I will say, sitting down to make this video today, I was reflecting on the books that I read and it felt kind of forgettable. I guess that was like my main complaint, is like it was really fun while I read it and then I kind of forgot about it. So the next book I have is The Last to Vanish. I borrowed this from the library on audio. I gave it 2.5-ish stars. I did listen to this all in one day, which could have impacted my rating, but I was cleaning and preparing to leave for the beach while I was listening to it. This is the story of a place on the Appalachian Trail, which was very interesting because I live exactly almost where this book takes place. And I did feel like she nailed kind of the what it's like to live in Appalachia and live by the Appalachian Trail. So that was really cool, but I felt like a lot of things got really lost in this mystery. I felt like it ended up being really boring in the middle, and it felt like it was very repetitive. So it's basically about this hotel or like extended stay, I guess, that is based on the Appalachian Trail, and people disappear from it quite frequently. a guy disappeared about a year ago, and his brother comes to this hotel stay place to try to figure out what happened to his brother. That's the basis of the story. I will say, as someone who lives by the Appalachian Trail, people do go missing and die on it quite frequently. So I did feel like that was really cool that we were now seeing a fiction mystery novel about something that really is a problem in real life that most people don't know about. So that was cool. But in terms of the mystery, it fell flat for me. It felt a little boring and very repetitive. Like, she kept explaining over and over and over again that people go missing all the time. I'm like, we get it. Like, at this point, we understand that. Let's learn more about the characters and the actual mystery here. But I didn't feel like it ever really got there. So that was my first Megan Miranda book. I do want to give her more of a try because I didn't like hate it. I just felt like it really slogged through the middle and felt very repetitive. The next two is I read the 10th and 11th books in the Women's Murder Club series. I gave them 3 stars. There's not much I can say about that. I can tell you why that I read them. So I borrowed them on audio from the library. They just feel like listening to crappy reality TV in the background, or crappy like crime dramas in the background, and that's really what I was doing while we were moving locations at work. Yeah, I gave them 3 stars. Can't really say much about them because they're really far in a series of like 25 books now, but I'll keep going just because I get them from the library. Sometimes I get in the mood for some crappy, I don't know, you guys get the point. But yeah, they're part of the Women's Murder Club series, where this group of women solve murders and get into a lot of drama together and in life. So next, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I did not give this book a rating because I felt like, well, one, it's like my wife's favorite book. She has done a lot of studies and has written a lot of really important papers in school that have went to conferences based off this book. So I wanted to figure out what it was all about. I didn't give it a rating. I did enjoy it. I read this from the library physically. It wasn't what I expected, and I guess the one thing that I will say is I haven't watched the show yet, but I do know that the show is loosely based off The Haunting of Hill House and really isn't anything like what the book is about. It wasn't really about a haunting or a ghost story. It's more of a character study of the main character, Eleanor, and a commentary on mental illness. That's really what the book is about. And so if you are going to go in to read The Haunting of Hill House, it wasn't what I expected, and I guess maybe know that. I also wanted to read it because later this year a book is coming out, and it's going to be a sapphic book later, and it's being made into a series, which might sound confusing, but the person who wrote it actually got permission from Shirley Jackson's family to continue the story, and it's going to be sapphic, and it sounds really good, so we'll see. And I wanted to read that, so I also wanted to get this under my belt, and it's Casey's like area of study. The next book I read was The Decagon House Murders, which was picked by my friend Neve. I'm reading a few books that she's picked for me to read that I'll do a video on later, so I don't want to say too much about this now. I guess I'll leave it at I did not like this book. I felt like the mystery fell flat. I felt like it was over dramatized. I felt like the storytelling was not very good, and yeah, I'll leave it at that for now until that video comes out later. The next book I read is Never Lie. This is a very popular thriller right now. I think all of her books are pretty popular right now, and so I want to make my way through them. This one I ended up giving 4 stars. I felt like the premise was really, really cool. So essentially, this couple who are newlyweds are going to look at a house that they want to buy, and a really bad snowstorm comes. They eventually make it to the house, but it's clear that they cannot leave. Turns out that this is the house. Oh, actually, I don't know if that's a spoiler or not. Okay, I won't say much. Turns out that this is the house of a prominent person, and our main female character stumbles upon some tapes. I do know that this is part of the synopsis. In these tapes are therapy sessions, and I'm a therapist, so I thought, that's interesting. And so through the past and the present, you come to find out that there are some things that have happened in this house that are really bad. And there is currently someone else in the house. The couple thinks they're like hearing things, they're seeing things, being moved out of place, and it's some commentary on their individual relationship. The reason I ended up giving it 4 stars and not 5 stars is because I felt like the ending could have done really, really well if it just had one plot twist. But it had plot twist after plot twist after plot twist, and connections between characters that I'm like, that is absurd. Like, these characters, it does not feel authentic that they are actually connected in this way. So that's kind of my soapbox about that. I'm going to do a video. I've been reading a bunch of thrillers actually, so I'm going to do a video at some point, hopefully, about the thrillers that I've read recently and kind of the things that worked for me and things that didn't work. But yeah, there's that. The next book that I read was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I gave this book 2 stars. I did a whole video about this book, so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. If you want to hear my thoughts on that book and why I gave it 2 stars, the video will be linked in the description box below. The next book that I read is The Ghost Club. This is a book that I actually got from Penguin Random House Audio. It is a nonfiction book about a group of people who have met across a really long spectrum of time, and starting in like the 1800s to try to investigate ghosts and figure out, is this scientific, is this religious based? And it kind of talks about how that, and this club is still going. Obviously the members are very different. And also it kind of confronts this era of time where people were being kind of scammed about ghosts and fortune telling, reading, and that sort of thing. It's very short. I feel like it was okay. I mean, I gave it 4 stars, maybe it'd be more of like a 3.5. The middle was a little bit boring, but I think it did a good job achieving what it set out to achieve. And it was a short little read, and I learned a little bit about what ghost hunting has looked like over the past century, I guess. Okay, I only have 2 left, and they're going to be very quick. So The Night Shift, I read recently. I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. This is a book that goes back and forth between the past and the present, and about murders that could be connected. So a while ago, these people in like the 90s, these people were murdered in a Blockbuster, and then another thing happens in an ice cream shop that is identical to that murder that happened in the 90s at the Blockbuster. I loved this story. This is where thrillers, I actually feel like this was more of a mystery. And again, I hope to do a video in the future where I break this down a little bit more, but I loved this book. If you've been wondering if it's good, yes, it's very good. I gave it 5 stars. There's a few different characters, and they are all sort of main characters, and we get to know them and how they're related to the story. We have someone who survived the last murders. We have someone who survived the current murders. We have someone who's a public defender and who is connected to the case in a unique way. And then we have an FBI agent. And I absolutely loved this book so much. The last book I read is Flying Solo by Linda Holmes. Just like with Eva Drake Starts Over, absolutely loved this book. This is the story about a girl whose great aunt passes away, and she goes to her house to clean it out and get rid of things. In particular, she stumbles upon this like artifact of a duck, and is trying to figure out, is this duck worth money? Along doing that, she comes into contact with someone who she loved in high school, who is recently divorced, and they kind of find their way back to each other in interesting and unique ways, I will say. I was a little bit, I felt like the ending was a little bit unexpected in a good way, and also there's sort of a plot twist in this book that I felt like was really unique. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in May. I read a lot of books, in May, and yeah, I would love to hear from you guys. What did you guys read? What did you love? And I'll see you guys in the next videos. Bye.